You cannot be anything you want to be, but you can be a lot more of who you already are.
Welcome, champions, to another episode of Champion Reads, where we delve into the best books, not only to talk about the best books and the best authors out there, but to show how they apply to our lives and how we can take those principles and improve our lives, our business, our happiness, and the world in general. Champion Reads is brought to you by Champion Circle, the networking group where we use the methods of the mastermind methodology, if I can speak correctly today, to come together and help lift each other up, improve each other, and build on the strengths that we each have. We're brought to you today with our founder of Champion Circle, Mr. John Kovacs Jr., global mastermind leader and all-around great guy. Also our co-producer, Mr. William Blake, dyslexic achievement coach and all-around really great guy. Not to make a comparison there. And I am Ian Sturmer. I'm an author, coach, and entrepreneur. Today we'll be discussing the book StrengthsFinder 2.0 from the Gallup Group, written by Tom Rath. StrengthsFinder 2.0, to give a real quick overview, really kind of goes through how all of us have different strengths. There's a huge list in here of the strengths that people have, and he talks about how each of those can apply to your work and your job and how each of those fit together. What it really does is teach us that there's no one strength that everyone has to have for a job. But by recognizing our own strengths and recognizing the strengths in our coworkers and how we can work together in a cooperative way to build on each other's strengths, helps move everyone forward. And perhaps a most important part of that is it brings some satisfaction to our lives. He starts out at the beginning of the book talking about a survey of about 10 million people that Gallup surveyed about job satisfaction. And one of the questions was, do you feel that you can, at work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. And most people disagreed with that. And the people who strongly disagreed with that did not have job satisfaction. They weren't happy with what they were doing. They felt they couldn't use their strengths in their job. And a lot of this talks about how we can find our strength and incorporate that into our job to make those two work together. So I'm going to open up a little bit now about the idea of what is our strength? How do we find our strength as the first step in that process? So what do you guys think? How can you find a strength? And do I have a strength? Am I strengthless? Or is there something in there?
Can you lift heavy weights? Maybe not heavy weights, but just anything. That's a strength. You know,
I can lift the weightlifting book, just not the weights.
Yeah. I'm really good at lifting air. It's just something I'm really good at. And, it's a strength of mine. Defining strength is a funny question to me because it could be scientific, it could be relative, or it could just be, based on perception. But what I love about the Gallup Strength Finder test is that it identifies strengths based on your habits, the way you think, and a few other just incredible statistical analyses. And I've taken this test 3 times throughout my life. And I won't get into that right now. I promised the guys I would be focused on our on our topics. But what is the strength? strength could be something you're good at, simply put, right? It could be something that you are able to do. One of the definitions that I found was, something that you do well that others might struggle with. So more of like a talent versus a strength, right? Getting into those, but the truth of it is that we all have strengths, and consequently, because there's opposition in all things, because we have strengths, we have weaknesses too. But strengths are things that you can do, are confident in doing. And strengths are things that you can burst into, like you didn't know you had a strength in uh, uh, kneading the dough, or baking goods, or creating something out of scratch, right? Maybe you have a great strength in cheering people up because you have great positive energy. There are all kinds of things that we have strengths in. And yeah, I think my personal definition of it is just simplified, like stuff you're good at and stuff that people recognize in you. That's how I would put it.
It's a good thing to keep it simple. Yeah, when I think of strength, I think of something that you're good at. And it doesn't, whether it's innate or not, whether it's a talent or a skill, I don't think defines whether it's a strength or not. I think on how I've defined strength is it's something that you're good at, maybe even great at initially, or something that you've worked on. I know in my life, when it comes to a strength, I have innate strengths, things I was born with just because of what I've been experienced in life and grew up with. Like I have auditory processing disorder, which means that I'm great at hearing, but if there's more than one audio thing going on, it kind of paralyzes me, right? So it's a double-edged sword. And I have dyslexia, which difficulty with reading, but can overcome and stuff like that. So it's when it comes to strengths, it's like what is our strength? And Ian, I know you asked that. Like, what is our strengths? And I think the way to find that is through really putting it through the grinder, putting it into the fire, see what comes out on the other end. A lot of us in society don't experience enough. And I think a lot of us don't know our own strengths because we just haven't gone out and done a bunch of stuff. That's one reason why in college I love generals, because generals touch so many different aspects. Of course, it's not narrowed down focus on what you're doing for your career, but it gets you out there enough to be like, oh, I like this. This might be the path that I want to go down. So when it comes to strengths, it's really as simple as what you're good at innately or not, and how do you find it? It's through your experience.
Yeah, I love that. And just kind of made me think of that old saying, leaders are made, not born. I think our strengths are discovered, not necessarily innate within us. And understanding where those strengths are, sometimes we look at those overly specific in a strength, especially when we put it into a career or a business setting. Say, well, I need to have strength in, closing a sale, when really maybe the strength is in communicating ideas, or the strength is in being able to find solutions. And when we try to narrow that strength down too much and fit it into a small niche, I think we lose sight of what the strength really is. And this book really helps us find those root strengths. So first of all, let me put a shout out to the book and encourage people to pick up a copy of the book and read through it and take the assessments, support our great books that we're looking at in the authors, and see what that leads us towards our own strengths. But one example I thought about that in understanding our strengths and how they fit in is from my father-in-law, actually, who came to this country later in life, didn't speak English, but he has an amazing memory. I'm just in awe of how good his memory is. And we lived in San Francisco at the time, and he had memorized the bus routes and the letters at the top of the bus, telling where the bus went to. He couldn't read them in English. He didn't know how to pronounce them, but he could spell out all of the bus routes and tell us where to go anywhere in the city almost. He had that great strength. And you could say, well, he never learned to speak English. He couldn't communicate. But he took his strength and was able to apply it to do better in his work. So I love that idea of finding what our strengths are and then how we can apply those into the work that we're doing, rather than feeling like a failure because we don't have what we thought was the one strength we needed, but instead finding our strengths and applying those in the way that's most needed for our job, and finding that satisfaction that we need in there, which again is a root part of this book, is finding satisfaction through using our strengths and finding our strengths. So
If I can jump into that, I'd also say that when it comes to our strengths that we're working on, it really sometimes we think we need to work on our weaknesses, and I really don't like that word in my vocabulary. I always say lesser strengths, but we think we have to work on the problem that's within us, which isn't really a problem. It's just something we're not good at, instead of working on the strengths, the things that we are great at. And if you think about it in this way, if we are to work on the things that we're not so good at, then we're adding a little bit onto that skill. So let's say we are not great at public speaking. So being able to start working on it, we add one up on that skill until it's a good skill. However, when you work on one single thing, all the rest of them tend to fall by the wayside. So if you have a great skill, let's say in baking, that skill is going to diminish while you're trying to work on the addition of this skill. But there's a really cool concept that I've learned, is that when it comes to working on things that we are great at, that come from us and they're just kind of naturally easy for us to do. For that example, if we were to focus on the baking, since that's our great skill, and just double down, then it's not an addition to the skill, it's multiplication. And when we're able to focus on that skill, we're able to multiply and thrive in that. And even though we might still work on public speaking just so it doesn't affect us negatively in the workplace, we focus on that main skill and double down on it so that we get 2, 3, 4 times the results. So I've always seen that when we work on our weaknesses, and as I've worked on my weaknesses, it's more of addition. But when I focus more on those things, those strengths that I'm great at, it multiplies instead of just adds.
I'll throw a thought in there too and say that when you strengthen your strengths, it enhances a part of you that makes you more stronger, more robust, more indispensable. Those are some words I'd use. And it ultimately raises your level of strengths. Subsequently, your level of maybe weaknesses or other supportive characters and characteristics and qualities may not be getting stronger, but they might be elevated. So the level of humanity is growing when you improve your strengths. Therefore, your weaknesses might be overlooked because of your strengths. And also, they're not nearly as recognizable. Now, if you kind of think of it in a different way, if you improve only your strengths, let's just say a physical example, right? If I just weightlift my left arm, my bicep becomes massive. Does that also mean my right arm will grow? No. Your left arm's only going to grow. You've all seen this with people who break a bone or an arm or a leg, and they're in a cast or they're in a boot for a while. Their left leg still has the strength, but their right leg, it's minimized. It's lost some muscle mass. So growing your strengths doesn't mean you're subsequently growing your weaknesses, but it does enhance your ability as a human to perform your duties. And sometimes people won't even recognize some of your weaknesses. Now, when it comes to businesses, companies, and corporations, there's always a quarterly or an annual review, right? And people want to, your managers, your supervisors want to look at your strengths and they want to look at your weaknesses. And that's usually a place where they'll tell you where to improve so that you can adjust. And people go about this the wrong way, I think. So this is just an opinion speaking from the world of John. But when you go about this by thinking, what do I need to improve? AKA, what are my weaknesses? Some of the things that people say, hey, I think you need to improve this. Well, if you already know how to do this, it might be considered a strength, just not as strong as it could be. And you could look at it as, okay, well, I will improve my strengths, because improving my strengths is what's going to give me a leg up, no pun intended, in this industry or in this job or in this work. And so a lot of this has a lot to do with mindset as well, which we've talked thoroughly about in this podcast. And so I just wanted to throw it out there, guys, that it is about perspective. It is about belief and mindset, but at the same time too, physically it makes sense. If you lift one, if you exercise one muscle, all the other muscles won't grow. But you will strengthen that area to give you an over enhanced version of yourself that would allow you to either rely on that strength more or to give that strength more credibility as it pulls the weaknesses along with it. So just an idea for your visual liking.
Yeah, I love that. And as we were talking, it kind of made me think of the idea that sometimes we have a problem that holds us back. And certainly we need to work on that problem to avoid it slowing us down and preventing us from doing something. But once we fix those major problems, then we can become good. But if we want to become great, we have to work on our strengths and make those even better. And if I remember this story correctly, this example, a friend of mine was a decathlon athlete for many years and set a goal in that. And I won't use any names, but it rhymes with Don Lovach Jr. But John shared this example when he was working to be an Olympic decathlon runner or decathlon athlete, that you don't necessarily focus on your weakest event, but you focus on your strongest event to make that even better. And that's how you become great, is finding that strength and focusing on that strength. Because a lot of times our strength is where we can have the most improvement. That's where we have some innate ability. That's where we have a desire for it. That's where we have a motivation. It's what we like doing, generally, is where our strength is. So as a result, we can actually get the most, sorry about that. My phone went off and I couldn't find the mute in time. We can get the most improvement in the things that we have a strength in, because that's what we enjoy doing. So focusing on that strength is actually a way that we can become better, faster, and become great.
One of Ian's strengths is picking really manly ringtones for his phone.
What a great example. What a great example it is. It also makes me think of Superman. What if Superman were to not focus on his skill in fighting, using his laser eyes, using his muscles, being invulnerable, but instead focused all his time on figuring out the scientific way to destroy kryptonite, right? If he spent all of his time doing that, maybe he'd come up with a solution, maybe he'd get better at it, but it would still be his weakness. It would still affect him, and it might get good at it, but it still affect him. On the other side, all those strengths of his skills in fighting, of him being Superman, would have lessened. And I think, would Superman be Superman if he did not focus on his strengths? I want to ask that to the champions who are listening. Are you really being yourself if you're not focusing on the things that you're good at and the things that you're great at? I'm going to go out on the limb and say, I don't think so. Because I think if we're trying to fit in, we're trying to go to the whim of what everyone else is telling us that we need to improve on, that we're trying to fit in. And if I know anything, is that we were not meant to fit in, we were meant to stand out. Each of us have our own names. Each of us have our own identities. We were born somewhere. We grew up somewhere, and we are trying to be whatever it is we want to be, that inner desire within us. If we're trying to be like everyone else, how can we stand out? But if we are wanting to stand out, be the champions, be the legends in our own lives, I think we need to acknowledge that we are humans. And because we are humans, we are going to be average and lesser average in a lot of things. But because we are great in a few things, that's what makes us powerful. And that's what gives us the power and encouragement to be able to go forward and believe, inspire, and empower other people as we go through our journey.
I'll share something too, and going back to Ian's example as well. What's really interesting, and I guess a lifelong application, is the track and field event. The decathlon encompasses 10 events: running, jumping, and throwing. And one of the reasons why I was taught, don't work on your weak events, work on your strong events, was because the scale of productivity in your best events was the better way to enhance your score. Because let's say, and this is just total truth, I was terrible at the high hurdles, but I was really great at running the 1500 meters, the mile, and the 400 and the 100, and I could score really high in those. And if I needed an even higher score, I would run really, really fast on my 1500, the mile run. If I didn't need much of a higher score because I was already on the podium or I was already winning, I could take a break and not really run hard in the 1500-mile run, which is a huge strength of mine. And so just knowing like where I was in the competition, be based on my point value system. Everyone thinks that track and field is all about, just running the faster time. Yes, but it's a race against yourself. And the more you compete against yourself and improve, the more you will find that you know exactly what you need to do to get the goal or achievement done. Now, people would critique that and say, well, why wouldn't you always give your best? Well, sometimes you don't need to. Why sacrifice your entire soul and energy if you've already got the win? And there's just different mindsets behind that. But without getting into that, I think interestingly enough, when it comes to workplace, or when you play with a team or you work with a team, versus our professional lives, when you focus on your strengths, you are innately encouraging not only the people around you to also activate their strengths, but to allow them to shine as well, or to I wanted to use the word compete, but I don't think that's the right word. But you allow and enable other people to shine and work on their strengths as well. And it's sort of this reciprocal process. It's quite contagious. When one person is shining, other people tend to find areas in which they can shine as well. And that's a helpful mindset tool when it comes to working in your strengths. Now, wrapping that thought up is your strengths are your strengths. So utilize them and utilize them well. Use them, don't abuse them, meaning give them the credit that they deserve, but also know that your strengths are there to help you and to help others and to help you in whatever you're working on. And so use your strengths for good. I meant to add that because of the Superman analogy as well.
Yeah, love that. And strengths, you use the word competition, and in some ways, depending on what you're doing, if you're in track and field, if you're in a competitive sport or something, then using your strengths to become at the best, the top, is the important part of it. But in a business, in a corporate setting, group setting, then using your strengths to uplift everyone, and allowing other people to use their strengths to uplift everyone as well, and complement each other, is a huge part of it. I know when I was first asked to join Champion Circle to be on the leadership team, I kind of came into some of the meetings and I wasn't really sure what I was supposed to be doing. And I was kind of looking to say, well, I'm supposed to be sharing my ideas and giving my strategies to put things forward and all that. But I was kind of trying to figure out my place in it. And I believe, not to throw out John all the time as an example for me here, but he has been in many ways. He mentioned to me at one point that I love it when you're here because the meeting flows better when you're here. Whether or not you say things to contribute it or throw out the perfect idea, the meeting flows better. And I realized there one of my strengths was to help to harmonize everything going on. And that helped me to realize that, hey, there's a strength. That's what I can focus on. I don't need to wedge myself into some place. I don't need to, to look for a problem and create myself as a solution to fix it. I can build on what I have and see how that fits in with somebody else. I use the example a lot of the inventor of the wheel had this great idea, but it only went so far until he met the inventor of the axle. And then the two of them came together and used their strengths and created something that was just amazing. And that's kind of what this is here. Once we understand first our own strengths, which is kind of the focus of this conversation, learn our strengths, learn what we are good at and how we can help to improve areas we go into, and then work with other people to collaborate, allow someone else to shine with their strength. Let them, it's not a competition when you're all working for the same thing. You find the area that you're best at. Like Abraham Lincoln had his team of rivals. You brought in people with different expertises, even though they have different opinions, different viewpoints, they had different strengths and they were able to work together rather than everyone trying to just prove they're the best. It's not about being the best, it's about strengthening everyone together.
Amen, brother. Goodness gracious. Such a powerful, powerful thing. I love Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals. I think the book's called Team of Rivals. But yeah, his cabinet that he had, he brought people in who basically did not think like he did. And I believe even some of his competitors who were competing with him for presidency, he invited onto his cabinet because he didn't want to miss things. He didn't want his thoughts, his emotions, his experience. He didn't want to have that overrule everything that was going on in the country. So he brought other people in. And I think that's the true test of courage, to bring people in, being strong in what you believe in, but know that you can still improve and still do it. Wonderful example. And I think based off of that, as I think about the people who are listening, as I think about my own life, how do we become ourselves? How do we focus more on the strengths that we have? And the first thing that comes to my mind is stop caring about social media. Now, that is very surprising from someone who is on social media a lot and knows a lot about social media, because it can be a wonderful asset. However, the way that a lot of people use it is not. They use it in the way of trying to trying to fill a hole inside themselves, emotionally, mentally, whatever it is, to fill that void, something that's missing. And because they do that, they see all the highlight reels of all their friends and buddies and other people's lives, and they think, why are my worst days not as good as their best days? But they don't ask themselves that. They're just like, why are their lives great while mine sucks? It's not. You're just seeing a highlight reel. That's all social media is. Not many people, probably a handful, are vulnerable enough to post exactly what's going on. Everyone else is simply posting the highlights. So as you go out and just stop comparing is really what it comes down to. If you want to focus on your strengths, if you want to be one of the greats, don't give a crap what other people think, because it's in you about what you're supposed to do. It's between you, your soul, and the higher being above. That is what you're supposed to be doing. No one else. Not your parents, not your family, not your friends, not the acquaintances, not the strangers who comment on your video on social media who know jack squat about you. Doesn't matter what they say. All that matters is what you want and what you're doing.
I'll wrap up my thoughts today and just share. We just finished reading a book called Mindset by Dr. Carol S. Dweck, and she shared an example that after Michael Jordan came back to the NBA after his debut in the National Baseball League, right? The NLB, National League. I don't know how to say it. Anyways, that he kind of meandered his way back onto the Chicago Bulls, and they lost in one of the rounds of the playoffs, did not go to the championship round. And that was a wake-up call to him. And he realized, okay, well, I need to work harder. I need to double down and make sure that we work on the things that we need most to win. And if you think about it, like, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? Well, how do you win a game of basketball? Well, you got to put the ball in that little ring. It's called a hoop. And that's how you win. You do that more than the other team. That simple. And I love what you said at the beginning of this podcast, Willie. Keep it simple. So, Michael Jordan could have worked on his back step, his defense. He could have worked on anything else. But you know what he worked on most? Shots. He was at practice hours before everyone else taking shots. He was there hours after practice taking shots. After every game, every win and loss, he was there taking more shots. It's not that he was a bad shooter at all. In fact, he was one of the highest scoring shooters of all time. He was one of the most dominant players of the game. He was incredible. But what was he working on? Shots. He was taking shots. The thing he was so good at, he practiced and practiced and practiced. And if you ask Ian, I actually think you brought this up in another podcast episode, Lance Armstrong. They asked him, what will you miss the most? And he said, practice. I'll miss practice, because practice is exactly what most people want. So I just had someone hit my doorbell. So I'll wrap up and say, go grab a copy of the book. My doggies are going crazy. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but grab a copy of the book and take the Strength Finder test. It will be worth your while, and you'll be able to learn how to use those strengths for your advantage. All right, I'm out.
Thank you. Well, your dog's strength is letting you know when someone's at the door, so they're taking advantage of their strength. We've all got to use that. Kind of want to wrap up too. I love what you said with Michael Jordan, and I avoid sports analogies because I have so little knowledge in sports. But no one, when you say Michael Jordan, no one says, oh, he really wasn't that good at baseball. When you say Michael Jordan, no one's going to say, yeah, he just wasn't that good of a coach after he finished playing. People say, oh, Michael Jordan, he inspired me to do better. He was the best. I don't know if he's the greatest basketball player still, but in my mind, he is. He's the greatest basketball player. His team knew what he was good at, and they let him do that, and they worked with him to do it. At the risk of trying another analogy, I had heard that Michael Jordan was so great because he had Scottie Pippen who assisted him and allowed Michael Jordan to use his greatest strength. And that's really what it's about, is finding our strength and incorporating that into a team, being able to put forth our strengths, find other people's strengths, and work together with them. So I want to thank our champions for joining us today. As we've talked about Strength Finder, there's an S in there that just makes it harder to say. Strength Finder would be so much easier, but Strength Finder, because, hey, we have more than just one strength. We are multi-strengths, which is also not easy to say. Strength Finder 2.0 by Tom Rath. I encourage you to pick up a copy of that, take a look at it, do the assessment. I'm going to set a goal to do the assessment myself before our next meeting so that I'll have a better opportunity to understand it as well. But thank you for joining us on Champion Reads, where we discover the best books by the best authors to create the best lives for ourselves. We're brought to you by Champion Circle. You can find out more about us at mychampioncircle.com or any social media with the little @ symbol at mychampioncircle. Especially love to have you like and subscribe if you like what you found here. So you can see more of our videos, podcasts, long form, short form, and find out more about our upcoming activities that you can join in as well for our mastermind methodology groups. So thank you for joining us. Thanks to Mr. John Kovacs Jr., founder of Champion Circle and Global Mastermind Leader, Mr. William Blake, Dyslexic Achievement Coach, and myself by me and Sturmer. Thank you and have a wonderful week.